Declan Ali did not pay $50 for love, comfort, or sweet words by the fire. He paid for strong hands and a steady back. He paid for survival. Winters in the Montana mountains killed careless men, and Declan had no room for weakness. But when the stagecoach finally rolled into Iron Ridge, what stepped down was not the woman he ordered. It was a ghost. She was small, shaking, and silent. She looked like a hard breath of wind could break her in half. For one long moment, Declan considered sending her back. He should have, because the woman standing before him was not just a shy bride. She carried secrets heavy enough to crush a man's soul before morning. The wind screamed through Iron Ridge that day, sharp with snow and pine. November of 1887 showed no mercy in the Montana Territory. Men survived here by being hard, and the ground swallowed the weak before winter fully set in. Declan stood apart from the others on the platform. He was tall, broad, and scarred with a white mark running from his temple down into his beard. His coat was made of cured animal hide, stitched by his own hands. A revolver rested on his hip, not as decoration, but because it was needed. The townsfolk kept their distance. To them, he was the bear of the ridge. The man who owned half the valley's timber, but lived like a wild thing in the mountains. The station master, old Gideon, cleared his throat. He was the only man in town who spoke to Declan without fear. "Stage is late," Gideon said. "Snow in the pass," Declan replied. His voice sounded like stone grinding on stone. He checked his gold pocket watch, a strange thing in his scarred hand. He did not feel nervous. That something tight twisted low in his gut. 2 months earlier, Declan had placed an ad in a Boston paper. He was tired of silence. He needed help curing meat, hauling wood, and surviving the winter. Wanted wife must be strong. Used to hard work and isolation, no romance promised, safety and shelter given for loyalty and labor. He expected a widow or a farmer's daughter, someone rough, someone solid. The train whistle cut through the valley. Steam and smoke filled the air as the iron beast pulled to a stop. Passengers stepped down. Miners, a family heading west. Then the conductor helped the last passenger down. Declan's breath caught. She was tiny, wrapped in a thin gray dress and a worn shawl that did nothing against the cold. A bonnet hid her face. She clutched a battered leather bag with pale, delicate hands. "Mr. Ali," the conductor called, waving a paper. "Delivery for Declan Ali. Miss Lydia Hartwell." Declan stepped forward. The crowd parted fast. "You Lydia?" he asked. She looked up slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes gray and wide with fear. She nodded once. "This is wrong," Declan said flatly. "I ordered a working woman." The conductor shrugged. "Paid in full, papers signed. She's yours. Hasn't spoken a word since Chicago." Declan looked back at her. "You mute?" Her lips trembled. No sound came out. Declan swore under his breath. He could not send her back. No one would take her. Another storm was coming. "Fine," he said. "Follow me." He took her bag and turned toward his wagon. He lifted her up without warning, his hands firm around her waist. She flinched hard at his touch. He noticed yet the ride into the mountains was long and silent. Snow thickened. The road narrowed into a scar along the cliff. Lydia sat stiffly, staring into the drop beside them. "Why come?" Declan finally asked. She pulled out a folded note and handed it to him. "I have nowhere else to go. I learn fast. I eat little. Please." The word "please" was smudged with a tear. By dusk, they reached his cabin. It was built of heavy logs, strong enough to fight avalanches and bears. Lydia stumbled when he set her down. He caught her against his chest and smelled soap and fear. A bruise showed on her cheek. "Who did that?" he asked. She shook her head, backing away. "You're safe here," he said. "Long as you work." Inside, Lydia surprised him. She lit the lamp, fed the fire, and warmed the cabin. She ate quietly, saying a prayer first. You take the bed, Declan said. I sleep in the loft. No duties. She nodded. That night, the storm came down hard. Wind slammed the cabin. Declan saw movement near the barn and grabbed his rifle. Lock the door, he told her. He did not see the cougar until it was already in the air. The fight was brutal and fast. Claws tore his coat. Teeth crushed into his arm. Declan killed the beast, but not before it ripped his leg open. Blood soaked the snow. He dragged himself back to the cabin and pounded on the door. Lydia opened it. She did not scream. She pulled him inside with strength he did not expect. She pressed a cloth to his wound, her hand steady. Then she spoke. Stop moving, she ordered, her voice clear and sharp. You're bleeding out. Declan stared at her, stunned as the shy, silent bride vanished before his eyes. The Declan drifted in and out of darkness, pulled under by pain and fever. The last thing he remembered clearly was Lydia's voice, no longer soft or silent, cutting through the chaos with calm authority. When he opened his eyes again, firelight danced across the ceiling beams, and the storm outside still howled like a living thing. His leg burned, his arm throbbed, but he was alive. He tried to move and failed. A strong hand pressed his shoulder down. Don't, Lydia said firmly. You'll tear the stitches. Her voice was steady, controlled, nothing like the frightened girl who had stepped off the train. Declan turned his head slowly. She knelt beside him, sleeves rolled up, hands stained faintly with dried blood. Her face was pale but focused, eyes sharp and unafraid. You talk, he rasped. Yes, she said simply. Duh. And if you want to keep breathing, you'll listen. She poured water between his lips. He drank, confused and weak. The night stretched on in fragments. Lydia cleaned his wounds again, changed dressings, and forced bitter tea down his throat. She worked without pause, without panic. When the fever took him, she stayed close, cooling his skin, murmuring commands that anchored him to the world. By morning, the storm broke. Sunlight spilled through the frost-covered window. Declan woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. He was in his bed, clean sheets. His leg was wrapped tight and neat, his arm bound carefully. Lydia stood by the stove wearing one of his flannel shirts, sleeves rolled high. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she moved with purpose. You're awake, she said. You saved me, Declan replied. Guh. She nodded once. Yes. Silence settled between them. Thick, but different now. You're not Lydia, he said. She met his gaze. No, my name is Eliza Vance, she continued. Lydia Hartwell is buried outside St. Louis. I took her name because she didn't need it anymore. Declan absorbed that slowly. Why the silence? My voice is known, Eliza said. My husband was Judge Ark Harold Thorne of Chicago. Powerful, cruel. He did not like women who corrected him. Declan's jaw tightened. I stole his ledger. She went on. Proof of bribes, land theft, murder. If he finds me, I die. Declan stared at the ceiling, then back at her. You brought death to my mountain. Yes, she said softly. And I would leave if I could. He shook his head. You're here now. The days that followed were tense, but steady. Eliza proved she was not weak, and she chopped vegetables, learned to tend the fire, and absorbed everything Declan showed her. She cleaned his rifle better than most men he knew. She listened more than she spoke. At night, they talked about the war, about Chicago, about survival. 3 weeks passed, then the rifle shot came at dawn. The bullet shattered wood inches from Declan's hand. He dropped into the snow, pain screaming through his leg. Eliza, down, he shouted. She was already moving from inside the cabin. The Winchester cracked. Snow exploded high on the ridge. A man screamed. Declan crawled back inside as Eliza barred the door. "They found us," she said. "Tracker," Declan growled. "Good one," the voice came from the trees. "Mrs. Thorne," the man called. "Come out. We can end this clean." Declan counted shapes in the woods. 4 men. "They'll burn us out," he said. "We run," Eliza replied. The caves. Fire hit the porch. Smoke poured under the eaves. They fled out the back, climbing the narrow trail as the cabin burned behind them. Bullets struck stone. Snow fell in sheets. They reached the cave too late. It was a dead end. Eliza worked fast, her mind sharp under pressure. She mixed powder and whiskey with shaking hands that never slowed. "Trust me," she said. She threw the makeshift bomb upward at the mountain answered. Snow roared down the cliff, swallowing the trail and the men on it. The cave shook. Darkness fell. They were buried alive. Declan struck a match. Eliza found a draft. They dug with bleeding hands until fresh air rushed in. They climbed. On the ridge above, one man remained. Cole Sterling. Eliza stepped forward, holding the ledger high. Declan rose behind the rock, pain forgotten, and fired. The wolf fell. Silence returned to the mountains. They collapsed together in the snow, breathless and alive. But below them, the cabin was gone. Winter had taken it, and spring would demand something new. The cold on the ridge was sharp and clean, but it did not feel cruel anymore. Declan and Eliza lay side by side in the snow, breathing hard, staring at the sky as the first stars appeared. Below them, at the body of Cole Sterling lay still, half buried by drifting snow. The wolf was dead at last. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Declan finally pushed himself up on one elbow, every muscle screaming in protest. His leg throbbed, but it held. He looked at Eliza, her face strewn with soot and tears frozen on her cheeks. "You ended it," he said quietly. "We ended it," she corrected. They climbed down slowly, carefully, finding a safer path as the light faded. By the time they reached a lower shelf of the mountain, night had fully settled. They made a small fire in the lee of a rock wall. The flames weak but enough. Eliza checked Declan's leg again, tightening the bandage. Her hands were gentle now, the fight gone from her posture. "You should hate me," she said suddenly. "I brought this here, your home, your peace." Declan stared into the fire. "Peace is a lie men tell themselves when they're lonely," he said. "You didn't break my life. You filled it." She looked at him then, really looked, as if weighing the truth of his words. Her shoulders finally relaxed. They survived the night. When morning came, the mountain was silent again, as if nothing had happened. Smoke rose from the ruins of the cabin far below. A black scar against the white. They buried what could be buried. They took what little remained. Then they walked. The winter slowly loosened its grip. Weeks later, when the snow began to melt, Iron Ridge whispered about ghosts, about the mountain man and his bride, who burned with their cabin and vanished. Then in early spring, a federal marshal rode into town. He carried a warrant and a name, Judge Ark Harold Thorne. While at the ledger had reached Washington, the proof was undeniable. Thorne was arrested in his chambers, stripped of his power in a single day. Men who once bowed to him would not meet his eyes. Up in the mountains, hammers rang. Declan rebuilt. The new cabin was stronger, larger. One room was set aside with a clean table, shelves, and light. Eliza's room. She no longer hid her voice. Travelers began to find their way up the ridge. Men with broken bones, women in labor, children with fever. Eliza treated them all. Some looked at her with doubt, most left alive. Declan watched her work with quiet pride. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Eliza stepped outside and leaned against the porch rail. Declan joined her, his leg healed enough to stand tall again. "You still think you bought a wife?" she asked. He smiled, slow and real. "No. Fate sent me a partner." She took his hand. The mountains stood silent around them, holding their secrets close. They had survived winter, violence, and truth. And together they would survive whatever came.